Hello everyone, and today we're going to talk about ball droppers. This is another short video. In the same way that I showed switches yesterday, if you specify during an asset import that you're creating a ball dropper, the object will have the property of being a ball shooter or an object dropper. Now I just drew this cage to contain my balls or drops, but I could just as easily have designed a cannon or a gun or anything to shoot the balls, because this has a pretty wide configuration as a dropper. I'm going to turn it on here, and you can see what's happening is it's shooting a random type of object upwards. The objects have random mass. They always shoot upwards, but they shoot upwards at a specific force. So since they all have different mass, they react differently as they go upwards until finally gravity grabs them. There is only one prerequisite for the operation of a ball dropper, is that gravity must be enabled. If I disable gravity, you will see that the ball dropper stops dropping objects. The objects that were on the screen pretty much come to rest once their energy drops off, and nothing more happens until I turn gravity back on, at which point the dropper starts again. So let's take a quick look at what you can set on a ball dropper. Here we have our dropper control. Normally, if you set something as a dropper, you'll just find this dropper control shows up in its properties window. And checking dropper control, again, we can set it as active or inactive. And again, we can set it as unmovable, or we can allow it as movable. A ball dropper could be on an arm, which is swinging around in circles. It could be on a gear pointing in various directions. Unmovable means it can't be those things. If you uncheck it, you're free to put it where you wish, but it can be moved around by hits with various masses. Keep that in mind. You can set it for triggered drops. This means that a switch is meant to trigger the ball dropper. If you don't check triggered drops, it means the ball dropper is free to run at whatever rate you tell it. The next one is random time drops. You can set it to fire between 0 seconds and whatever. I've got it set to, say, 0 to 6 seconds random drop time. It's worth noting that these random drop times and so on are what will happen if triggered by a switch when triggered drops is checked. Any of these things that will only happen when the switch is hit if a triggered drop is set. We can select the size of our objects. I've told it here to be between 4 and 20 millimeters randomly. If I don't check random size objects, I can just set the size of the objects that it will drop. We can set the mass of the objects that will drop. I've got it set for a random mass between 2 and 4. If I uncheck it, I can just set it for whatever mass I wish. The number of drops can be set. If I check infinite drops, it will never run out of ammunition. If I uncheck that, I can set the number of drops that will happen over its lifespan run during the simulation. We have the random drop type, or we can specify a sphere or a cube. We have impulsed output. Impulsed output, when checked, tells it to apply a force to the ball and not just simply create it in the window and allow gravity to take it off. I have it set here to shoot -1 in the Z direction. The Z direction of this object is in the Y-axis as I've flipped it when I placed it on the screen, and I've given it a power of 500. These powers are not in newtons or in any force. They're an arbitrary number at this point, so just think of them as power. Power of 500 is enough to push a mass of randomly selected between 2 and 4 a few inches high on the screen. If I was to increase the power, then it will shoot higher. As you can see here, the balls and cubes are now going higher. It doesn't stop them from hitting each other. They'll create collisions and so on in space. However, the more power you give them, the more they'll shoot in that direction. It's worth noting that if you have a ball dropper set to a particular power in a particular direction, that direction is relative to itself. So if I was then to put this dropper on a motor and spin it in space and tell it to shoot sideways, that sideways shot will go around in a circle, shooting in every direction. So it is relative to the position of the dropper itself. I think that's all that really needs to be said about droppers. You can play around with them yourself and see just how crazy you can get with them, but they're fairly easy to use, and if you don't use a switch to trigger them, they're easy to play with and to set to create whatever little show of objects that you like. Thanks a lot. This has been another Ticker short video.